Hello and welcome into the GSMC Sports Podcast brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. I'm your host, TJ Mabarty. We are coming to you live on Monday afternoon after an action-packed weekend of football in general, not just the NFL, but college football as well. We'll get a little bit more on the college football front tomorrow possibly, but as for today, we have so much to get into with the NFL. That's where we're going to be coming at you with first, starting with the Dak Prescott contract extension that was announced over the weekend, just hours before the NFL games kicked off. Dak becomes the highest paid player in NFL history. So we're going to be discussing the details of that contract, whether or not it was the right decision, and the Cowboys absolutely pummeling the Cleveland Browns in a blowout win as betting underdogs. So we'll dive into that. Additionally, we got the news over the weekend that Packers quarterback Jordan Love is expected to miss a few weeks with an MCL sprain when he got hurt at the very end of Friday night's game against the Philadelphia Eagles. So we'll talk about where the Packers move on from here and what the further details on the severity of this injury are. And then we're going to be diving into a couple of the surprises of the weekend and the Atlanta Falcons' offense being pretty much non-existent, or at least massively ineffective against the Pittsburgh Steelers in their loss, and additionally the New England Patriots pulling off the most surprising upset of the weekend. 7.5-point underdogs entering this game. They come out with a win atop the Cincinnati Bengals, which a lot of people, including myself, have a lot of expectations for this upcoming year. And the Patriots were able to start off this now post-Bill Belichick era with a step in the right direction. So we have a whole lot to dive into today, but before we get into all of that, just a reminder to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. To any of our viewers, be sure to use the comment section to give us your thoughts on the latest happenings in sports, whether it's a quick comment or a thoughtful question. We want to hear what you have to say, and we here at the GSMC Sports Network really appreciate the feedback of our viewers, and we try and make this show as interactive as possible. So don't be afraid to let us know what your thoughts are. Additionally, if you want to take it a step further, you can become a bigger part of the show by using the super chat button that is now available on YouTube, where you can leave a tip or donation along with a comment, and your comment will pop up on screen for everyone to see. You could additionally do so by going to the link that is streaming across the bottom ticker. That is gsmcpodcast.net. Either one would be greatly appreciated. But regardless of that, let us know what your thoughts are. So we are going to dive into our first segment of the day here. Over the weekend, we were just hours away from NFL action, and the news broke that the Dallas Cowboys and quarterback Dak Prescott have agreed on another record-breaking extension that will reset the quarterback market. This happened a few years ago when Dak signed his previous deal a few years ago in 2021, and now he is going to once again be resetting the quarterback market, where he receives a massive extension, biggest in NFL history, 4 years, $240 million, an average annual value of $60 million. That is the highest mark in NFL history, and it's the highest. It's a record-breaking deal in many different ways: in total value, in average annual value, in guaranteed money, $231 million guaranteed, $1 million more guaranteed than Deshaun Watson, which was a little bit interesting, especially considering the fact that they were about to play one another. I think that was more of a statement than anything, just the extra $1 million, just to say that he was the highest in NFL history. Also got the highest signing bonus in NFL history with $80 million. So again, just checking off the boxes of all of the different historical significances of this contract relative to every other contract that has ever existed in the NFL. So he is now under contract through the 2028 season. He is going to be 35 years old in that 2028 season. So at that point, 35 years old, we could be seeing Dak Prescott retiring as a lifelong Cowboy. I mean, he is already on pace to break just about every record in the books for the Cowboys. Taking this contract away now, along with it, and knowing that they have another few years on the books with Dak Prescott, an additional 4 years on top of it, he is probably going to smash every single one of those records, which is really incredible. Obviously, Dak Prescott has, had his fair share of doubters for years now. I do think that in large part it is just for the sake of the fact that he's playing for the Dallas Cowboys. Obviously, you have a little bit of a target on your back based off of that. But Dak going from a 4th-round selection to ultimately becoming the highest paid player in NFL history, it really is quite the remarkable story for him, and sort of overcoming odds along the way. Now, obviously, that being said, his overall success is not going to be measured in how much money he makes through his career, which is obviously a lot. It's about Super Bowls for the Dallas Cowboys, and that they are yet to do. They are yet to, I believe, I could be mistaken here, but I can double check. I believe they are yet to even make it to an NFC championship game at this point. So again, the expectations are more than just regular season wins, which he has also come away with year after year, especially in the past 3 seasons. And he's even won some playoff games along the way as well. But that being said, it's, I believe, 2 playoff games throughout the entirety of his career. That's just not the measure of success for the Dallas Cowboys. So they are hoping that during these next few years, they are mortgaging a ton of their salary cap space into Dak Prescott with hopes that he is good enough to be able to elevate the remainder of the roster as well. And that is still definitely to be determined, and it is going to begin to be tested a little bit more starting this year, considering the fact that it's not just Dak getting this massive deal, it's also his number one weapon as well, and CeeDee Lamb, who just signed a 4-year, $136 million deal less than 2 weeks ago. So they are going to have these 2 players eating up the majority, a very good portion of their salary cap for the next handful of years. Add to that as well that they're going to need to hand out another contract still to star linebacker Micah Parsons, that you're going to have 3 players that will probably make around half of your salary cap, if not more than that. So the Cowboys are going to need to rely on their stars in order to, and it's generally speaking a pretty well-run organization, that it's not like it's solely going to come down to these 3 players, but you're going to have a lot weaker rosters outside of those 3 players in relation to what Dak Prescott has dealt with for a lot of his time in Dallas. But that's not to say that they are going to be entirely untalented. I do still think that they have done an excellent job drafting defensively. You look at the likes of Trayvon Diggs and Deron Bland in that secondary have been massive additions for them. Osa Odigizua on the defensive line is another player that has been massively important for them. Across the board, they have been a pretty well drafting team for the past handful of years, and as much as, yes, Dak is now going to take up a ton of that money, as will CeeDee Lamb and Micah Parsons, it's not like this team is going to be purely the 3 of those players. But that being said, they're going to have to continue to prove that they can be a well-functioning organization, because if there's any lesson in the NFL, it's not what have you done, it's what are you doing for me now. So the Cowboys are going to need to continue to prove themselves from an ownership standpoint. That being said, I do believe that this was the right deal for the Cowboys to get this done with Dak. I don't really know what the backup plan would have been for them. We saw Trey Lance clearly. Maybe there was a slight, long shot hope that Trey Lance would have been able to eventually succeed Dak if he started playing really well for them once he got familiar in the system. That clearly was not the case. That was showcased during preseason. And either way, that would have been a long shot anyways to expect him to take on the reins from Dak. And at this point, the Cowboys are going to be too competitive of a team probably to even be in the realm of drafting a quarterback within the top 10. And even if they were, that's always still such a crapshoot. And I don't feel like the Cowboys have this excellent foundation in terms of offensive pieces around the quarterback position. And Mike McCarthy is a good play caller, but I don't think that he's on the level of the Sean McVays or the Mike McDaniels that are able to sort of almost I wouldn't say single-handedly, but those coaches are the ones who can really elevate a situation to another level that I just don't believe Mike McCarthy is on par with them. Some of the decision making, of course, the clock management has never exactly been a strength of Mike McCarthy, but either way, still a good enough coach that they're going to continue to win games, and you shouldn't be worried about them dipping off in too significantly in terms of regular season success. I did have them missing the playoffs this year, but it's also, always hard to predict those things headed into the season. So the Cowboys, they feel like they are in position to continue contending. It sounds like the confidence around the front office is that they are still bought in the current foundation that they have, but they also got out to a nice start yesterday by blowing the doors off of the Cleveland Browns. Dak playing his first game under this contract, again, just hours later after it was announced. He was pretty good, all things considered. 19 of 32, 179 passing yards and a touchdown. He really wasn't asked to do all that much considering by the time he touched the ball for the first time in the second half, it was already a 27-3 ball game. And, early on, I thought that maybe he was a little bit off on a couple throws, but he had the really nice pass to Brandon Cooks in the end zone for that first touchdown. The offense as a whole, I thought, looked very functional for the most part. Definitely a clear game plan to get CeeDee Lamb the ball as many times as possible. He was showing out early on there. It was in the passing game, but a little bit more designed runs for CeeDee as well. So, he is far and away the best playmaker on that Cowboys offense that you should continue to expect him to be force-fed. I'm actually kicking myself because just last week I did an awards prediction for this upcoming season. I was back and forth between Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb, and I just think that Lamb is going to get so many looks in this Cowboys offense that, he's probably a very good bet for that. But the Cowboys, again, they looked good overall, very convincing. A lot of optimism about their defense, which was already the case. There were maybe some questions about Mike Zimmer. He has been out of football for a couple years. He comes in as the defensive coordinator for the Cowboys, and I thought he did an excellent job. All of that being said, the Browns were a mess, and they were just disjointed from the jump, and it was for a couple reasons. Now, off the bat, I had actually on Friday picked the Browns to cover the 2.5 point spread. It didn't help, I think, by any means, the fact that they were missing both of their starting offensive tackles, and against this defense and against Micah Parsons, that is a scary result. Deshaun Watson was running for his life for a lot of this game, and the fact that, yeah, there were injuries involved there, but that being said, I thought it went definitely further beyond that with the play of Deshaun Watson, and this is going to be a topic that we monitor closely throughout the course of this season. But again, Watson was a bit of a disaster in this game. 24 of 45, 169 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 interception. I guess he used his legs a little bit to pick up 39 yards as well. He also used his legs a little bit to have bad footwork, throwing in the pocket. Even the times that he did have a pretty clean pocket, I thought he was running into pressure a little bit as well. He was sacked 6 times. And again, the offensive line missing both of their starting offensive tackles in Jedrick Wills and Jack Conklin is definitely a big contributor to the fact that they looked so disjointed. But I don't think that fully excuses what we saw from Deshaun Watson, especially considering at this point, he's just been so poor for the Browns basically his entire tenure, and knowing that he has that contract attached to his name. I talked about, we don't need Watson to be 2019, 2020 Deshaun Watson anymore. I don't have any expectations for him being elite, but just for the sake of him and for the sake of Browns fans, he has to at least be a league average quarterback. And that has been a little bit of a struggle for him up to this point. So I do sort of wonder what the long-term future looks like for Deshaun Watson with the Browns. Again, a story that I don't want to harp on too much at this very moment because there's still a lot of year left. It is just week 1. And the reality is, if the Browns have any excuse to hold on to Watson, they're going to, considering the fact that the alternative is just releasing him and having to take on $172 million in dead cap. That, I mean, maybe they just pull a Broncos and, like they did to Russell Wilson, just sort of bite the bullet and get it over with. But, I mean, just a horrible, horrible start to the season ahead for the Cleveland Browns. Now, again, week 1, these things, a lot of the times these results can be very deceiving, but it's just the fact that we also haven't seen any real optimism from Watson since being traded to Cleveland, and it's a messy situation there. Absolutely. But to circle back here to the Cowboys, it's a nice win for them. I picked against them on Friday. I have less confidence for them this upcoming season than I have in years past. I still think they're going to be competitive and in that playoff hunt, but it was never about proving yourself against the Browns week 1. This is more so about, can you match up against the top teams in the league, and in the regular season, even in years past, they've been able to do so. But it's about playoff success in Dallas, as they've been on this extensive drought of now almost 30 years since the last time they went to the Super Bowl. That's just not good enough. So you can feel good about yourself, Cowboys fans, 100%, not trying to take away, but I'm not ready to get swept up that much in this type of a win for the Cowboys. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section if you did see something that was that much more significance that really altered your perspective on the upcoming season for Dallas. But we are going to be talking about another quarterback now that got a lucrative contract extension this offseason in Jordan Love, who him and the Packers faced off against the Eagles on Friday night in Brazil. So we'll touch a little bit on that entire experience of the international game. But more importantly, Jordan Love suffered an MCL sprain at the end of that game and is expected to miss a few weeks. So we are going to be diving into the finer details surrounding the injury for Love and talking about what the outlook appears to be for the Packers moving forward here. But first, we have to take a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't replaced, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the news it fits. I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift. Oh,
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as we are now going to be moving on to the news that Green Bay Packers quarterback Jordan Love is expected to miss multiple weeks with an MCL sprain that he suffered at the end of the Packers game versus the Eagles on Friday night. And this was super disheartening. The second to last play, so, right at that final buzzer, 6 seconds left in the game, and you get this type of news. It is very much disheartening. And it was a weird game for a handful of reasons. But Love was already seemingly dealing with some sort of calf tightness. He continued to sort of stretch it out, had trainers working on him, it appeared, and I'm not sure sort of if there could have been any sort of correlation. MCL to calf isn't exactly an exact connection there, but, Jordan Love, he just ended up getting rolled up on by Jalen Carter and Josh Sweat on that second to last play, and goes down, had to come out of the game immediately. Malik Willis took the last 2 snaps of the game for the Packers, ultimately incompletion and a sack. So that was sort of that, as the Packers did fall to the Eagles in that game. Now, the good news for Packers fans is that he isn't expected to need surgery. That Ian Rappaport specifically said that he was expecting around a 3-week injury for Jordan Love here. Could be 3 to 4 weeks is the general timeline that the public has gotten up to this point. But a tough start to Love's new 4-year, $225 million contract. Not that by any means the Packers fans or the Packers themselves should be feeling all that bad about handing out the contract, but definitely an unfortunate start to this, especially considering the fact that this is somebody in Love that really has such a limited sample size of play anyways, that he's going to miss more time. That is definitely unfortunate. But again, that being said, I think the Packers are going to be just fine ultimately. I think Love is going to come back, and that the Packers should continue to compete for the playoffs. As for this game in particular between the Packers and the Eagles, like I mentioned, it was a weird one. This was the inaugural game in Brazil, so definitely a couple different reasons to only take the results of this game so seriously. It was a sloppy game from both the Eagles, from the Packers, from the playing conditions themselves. The field was a little bit of a disaster. I'm sure the Eagles fans were having a little bit of deja vu going back to the Super Bowl a couple years ago against the Chiefs, but the grass was, I don't know exactly what it could have been, but players on both sides were slipping all over the place. And again, it just kind of made it a little bit hard to take all too seriously the results of this game. And it wasn't just the field itself. It was also the fact that both of these teams looked like they were teams that were playing in their first games of the season. Penalties galore to begin this game, especially so on the Packers. The Packers probably should have won this game, but they continued to shoot themselves in the foot throughout the first half and the first quarter, even more so specifically. But ultimately, I just feel like I have a hard time with any types of travel games like that. You're playing in another hemisphere. That's usually a bit of an obstacle. And yeah, sure, both teams are playing there. It's just on either side, I have a hard time taking the results all too seriously. That being said, the Packers did look dysfunctional, and Jordan Love did not look very good, in my opinion. He was 17 of 34 in this game, 260 passing yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 interception. Interception was a weird one where, again, I'd love to get inside of his head there as to what happened because he had a pretty clean pocket. This was Packers backed up sort of in their own territory in the third quarter and just almost made a little bit of a jump pass that he just didn't have his footing. Now, again, I'm curious why it specifically this instance because I'm curious if the playing surface had anything to do with it, but just a bad decision overall. Didn't see safety Reed Blankenship sort of crashing down on the play. Zach Bond, who, by the way, was incredible for the Eagles in this game, linebacker that is expected to take on a bigger role with Philadelphia this season. He was flying all over the field. He had some pretty good coverage in that play as well, matched up against Packers tight end Luke Musgrave. So ultimately, not a very good game from Jordan Love. Not something that I'm panicking about. But the schedule for the Packers here now moving forward, because it is just a week 1 game that you can't put too much stock into. But obviously, there are all the mantras about the idea of the unlikelihood of going 0-3 and then making the playoffs. And just starting off the season strong is massively important in the NFL because it is the professional American sport, at least, that does have the highest sense of urgency on every regular season game. So, this game, they can live with it, but they're going to need to make sure they don't dig themselves into too far of a hole here. Their upcoming schedule, like we mentioned, Jordan Love expected to be out 3 or 4 weeks. So this upcoming Sunday, they have their home opener against the Indianapolis Colts, and then it is at Tennessee versus Minnesota at home, and then on the road to face the Rams. So ultimately, feels like a pretty manageable schedule, all things considered there. The Colts are a feisty team. I'm not a believer in the Titans. Vikings are interesting. I mean, they came out and Sam Darnold on the road looked pretty good, granted against the Giants. So I'm going to have to probably wait and see a little bit more from the Vikings there, but they could definitely be frisky. And then the Rams as well are a team that made the playoffs last year, are a well-coached organization. So I think it's a manageable schedule for the Packers in these next few weeks while we sort of see what the timeline is. But definitely no cakewalks, in my opinion. And, I think that the 7th seed in the NFC is probably going to take around 10 wins. So that's why if you get off to a start 2-3, 1-4, that could be a little bit messy. And because I think that the division as well in the NFC North is pretty tough, all things considered. Lions didn't look great in last night's game against the Rams, but still came away with the win. You have the Bears winning their game. They also looked massively dysfunctional. We're going to do a deeper dive into what sort of took place with the Bears tomorrow. And then, again, the Vikings, they won. They played the Giants, obviously, but they did get the win there. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see how they move forward with this because I wouldn't have a ton of confidence in backup quarterback Malik Willis, who just was traded to the Packers 2 weeks ago, and now he's going to start these games for them. I'm a little bit skeptical. I'm curious whether or not there is another move that the Packers could make to try and at least fill a stopgap here. Ultimately, it's only a few weeks, so that's where a situation like a Ryan Tannehill, who just spoke out about how he's waiting for sort of the perfect situation to arise for him, he could sign with the Packers, and he could be a good addition for the Packers, but that being said, is he going to wait out longer to see if there's maybe a more permanent job that becomes available? We'll have to see, but ultimately, the Packers, I think they'll be okay, but a brutal way to start the season receiving this type of injury news. Very briefly here, on the Eagles side of this game, Saquon Barkley, massive debut for the Eagles. 24 carries, 109 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns. Add to that a receiving touchdown with some nice little twinkle toes on the sideline of the end zone. He was very impressive in his Eagles debut. And you talk about an Eagles team that their identity at their core since Jalen Hurts has taken over has been a little bit of the ground and pound first, and then play off of that with really good receivers, obviously, in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. But last year, their run game was not the same after DeAndre Swift's great debut, week 1, sort of very quickly tapered off there. Hopefully for Eagles fans, that is not the case this upcoming season. But, overall, thought that the offense did seem to take a step forward from last year. I thought that Kellen Moore ultimately called a pretty good game for the Eagles. Obviously coming off of a season where the Eagles fired both of their coordinators from last year heading into this year. Nick Sirianni saying that he was going to take a step back a little bit in terms of interfering with the offense and let Jalen Hurts and Kellen Moore try and be a little bit more innovative with the passing game. I thought it looked pretty good as you can, really, for week 1. They put up 34 points. Now, some of that was due to some Packers mistakes that the Eagles were able to benefit from. But either way, I just thought the overall pass design looked significantly better for them. Jalen Hurts was not great in the game either. Again, I have a hard time with a game in Brazil week 1 saying that, this showed us why this team is or isn't a serious contender. Jalen Hurts definitely wanted more from him. He was 20 of 34, 278 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. The decision making on those touchdowns, really not great. So, one of them coming in the red zone for what could have been a massive scoring drive, just allowing the Packers to hang in a little bit longer than they should have. But I'm going to wait until either one of these teams are sort of back in the United States for starters and playing on a little bit more normal conditions before overreacting to anything that we saw this week. But, I thought that there were some positives on defense as well. Like I mentioned, Zach Bond, 15 tackles, 11 of them solo. He was sort of a one-man wrecking crew out there. Reed Blankenship looked really good for them. Quinyon Mitchell, the first-round cornerback that they drafted, had a pretty good game. So all in all, I think that there's a lot of promise from this Eagles team. And sure, again, it was far from flawless, but that being said, I think that you sort of have to take the positives and just understanding that these are areas that you can grow. You're not going to go out and play a perfect game in week 1. I think that we saw that across the NFL, but ultimately, the Eagles should be hopefully headed back in the right direction after the collapse that occurred last year. But we are going to now touch on another situation. Like I mentioned, we do not try and overreact to week 1 games in the NFL. But that being said, it was a very disappointing beginning to Kirk Cousins' tenure with the Atlanta Falcons. The offense was very stagnant throughout the game, and ultimately he was a little bit reckless with his decision making. So I want to talk about whether or not there is a lot of cause for concern for the Falcons. Is the overreaction warranted, or do we just need to settle into this situation a little bit more? So we're going to dive into that, but before we do so, we're going to be taking a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast as we now dive into the interesting story out of Atlanta and just the fact that their offense mightily struggled in their season opening game against a Pittsburgh Steelers team that a lot of people sort of grew cold on throughout the course of the offseason. I've been a little bit of a pessimist with the Steelers myself personally, and this was not what the Falcons wanted to see from their debut after giving Kirk Cousins this massive contract in the offseason, where they bring him in and we're expecting him to sort of take this offense to the next level. They have all of these different weapons that they feel like they can unlock. Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, the 3 first-rounders they drafted in consecutive years, and have been waiting for any of them to really break out. That wasn't so much the case during this game for the Falcons, and that was for a couple reasons. Now, we'll start with Kirk Cousins here because that is the main story. 16 of 26, 155 passing yards, 1 touchdown, 2 interceptions. And I will have some leeway with Kirk Cousins, where I have never really been a Cousins believer. I thought that this was a risky move for the Falcons to sign him to that big of a contract during the offseason. But that being said, coming off of a year when your quarterbacks are Taylor Heineke and Desmond Ridder, anything's an upgrade, and I can understand getting desperate maybe a little bit. But This was not a good game, and Kirk Cousins, to his defense, was under pressure for a lot of that game. That Steelers defense, even if you're not a believer in a lot of their offensive foundation, that is a defense that can play. TJ Watt was an absolute monster in this game for them, causing havoc. And on that note as well, forced an extra fumble against Kirk Cousins. Kirk Cousins fumbled 2 times, both of which were overturned by penalties that were called as well. So things could have even been worse for Kirk Cousins in this debut. But he was under duress for a lot of the game, so I will give him at least that statement of, I understand that was not an easy situation to walk into. The decision making, though, coming off of that as well, was a bit concerning because on both of the plays, they were almost a little bit similar in the fact that on the first play, he was under pressure and he throws into the middle of the field with double coverage. And, being hit as he throws a little bit, Larry Ogunjobi was in his face. That's just a throw that you're not going to have that same juice on it. Kirk Cousins, he even had a few seconds. He had a good few 3 seconds in the pocket where you have to be able to recognize the defense in front of you and not make the big mistake, which is turning the ball over. That's what he did there. The second interception, pocket collapsing around him, looked like he was hit as he throws a little bit, but again, a situation where you have to know that you're not going to have the arm strength to make a throw to outside of the numbers, over multiple defenders, and just sort of drop it in the pocket there. And he ends up throwing that interception as well, which sort of came back to really seal the game for the Steelers to win this game. By the way, on that play as well, possibly worth noting that for you Steelers fans out there, it was Dante Jackson with that second interception to seal the game. And Dante Jackson was the cornerback that the Steelers acquired in the Deontay Johnson trade with the Panthers during the offseason. So looks like that may already be paying dividends for the Steelers as they continue to ramp up with this defense. But back to Kirk Cousins, I just thought that the decision making was not good enough for, the level of veteran experience. Like I mentioned, could have had another couple turnovers in that mess as well. Though the one thing that I will say is it is his first game of playing football after missing about 11 months. It definitely looked that way as well. And that excuse can only go on for so long. We've seen Kirk Cousins get off to sluggish starts in the past. I would even go to last year as well, before the Vikings started building up some momentum. Kirk Cousins wasn't great in those first couple games as well, as they lost their first few games of the season. So I'm not entirely out on it, but that being said, one of the biggest things we talked about during this past offseason is Falcons fans are now hoping for Kirk Cousins to be the answer that can lead them to some playoff wins. And I mean, some people put them in Super Bowl contention. I myself was never really that on board with the Falcons, but I thought they could absolutely take a step in the right direction. And that's still very much on the table. But this is a fan base that has now seen their franchise invest into a quarterback that they're not very familiar with, and then also draft another quarterback with the 8th overall pick. So they're not exactly going to have a ton of patience, I feel like, for Kirk Cousins and be overly welcoming if this contract looks like a disaster to start. And I'm not saying it's a disaster after one game. That would be irresponsible. But the clock, I do feel like, is ticking a little bit. And that's unfair to Kirk Cousins 100%. But it's also just kind of the reality of the situation the Falcons put themselves into here with this decision that Michael Penix is probably the more exciting player to be a fan of for a casual fan. And I like Michael Penix too. Do I know if he's going to be a great NFL player? No. But that unknown is almost just as exciting as anything else. And, just thinking about what the upside could be. I'm sure every Falcons fan by this point has watched Penix's fourth quarter heroics in the playoff game that he played against Texas last year. So something to take into consideration. And I think it's unfair to Kirk Cousins, and I would give him a few weeks here for whatever it's worth. He had moments that looked all right. And the Falcons offense in general, I thought that they ran the ball overall pretty good. The issue is there's still a lack of explosion with this offense, and that's something that new offensive coordinator Zach Robinson, I'm sure, is going to be looking to add. Bijan Robinson in this game, 18 carries, 68 yards. It was overall productive. It wasn't great, though. And I did think that they got a good push up front. I thought that some of the innovation with it as well, for whatever it's worth. There was the 4th and short situation for the Falcons in the second half where it looked like Kirk Cousins was just going to take it himself up the middle, but they ended up splitting Bijan Robinson out on the right, motioning him across the formation and giving him a jet sweep. Great blocking up front once again to be able to pick that one up. So that was cool. The play innovation of the flood concept in the red zone that ended up sort of just leaving Kyle Pitts stranded wide open by himself for Kirk's touchdown pass. Pretty good play there as well. So I think that this is definitely a work in progress and not something that I'm going to entirely abandon week one, because if I'm not mistaken as well, Zach Robinson, he's obviously coached for a number of years now, but I believe this is his first official offensive coordinator job as well. So there's a lot of new pieces here in Atlanta, and I do think that that is a very talented Steelers defense that they were facing as well, that there is definitely room for growth from here, I should say. But again, just the lack of explosiveness is really something that concerned me. I don't think the Steelers' offense is particularly explosive, generally speaking, and yet we saw Najee Harris rip off a 20-yard run. We saw George Pickens on a few instances have some big pickups. I thought that, by the way, we'll probably get a little bit more into the quarterback conversation in Pittsburgh, but I thought Justin Fields looked pretty good, all things considered. Now, finishing off the drives was a bit more of a concern, but I wouldn't even fully put it on him. Steelers really hurt themselves with penalties in this game and just the negative plays as well. They had the explosion, but they also had plays that set them back behind the sticks. And Justin Fields is somebody that I think can play really well when you're on script and can even sort of make up for some deficiencies. You saw the first down conversion of the game for Fields and Pittsburgh was him scrambling up on a 3rd and 7. So I thought the Fields looked pretty good, all things considered, and him and George Pickens seemed to have a connection. Now, that could just be that Pickens is ready to fully emerge. Last year, over 1,000 yards for the first time of his career, led the NFL in yards per reception at 18.1. This game, pretty good overall, 6 catches on 7 targets, 85 yards, and again, had a couple of those explosive plays down the field that definitely made Steelers fans excited. I think 2 of them counted, and then there was another one that was a big-time pickup that ended up getting called back because of a penalty, but I ultimately think that this was just for the Falcons, just sort of to circle back around, they're going to need to find sort of that game-breaking play. They're going to have to find a way to protect Kirk Cousins a little bit more and be able to open up those deep shots as well, because he just never had the time even in this offense. And I'm sure that part of the Steelers' game plan as well was knowing Kirk Cousins hasn't played football in just about 11 months. We're going to bring the heat, and we're going to sort of test out that mobility. Didn't give you much. He did on the touchdown throw to Pitts. He was sort of pulled back outside, rolled out to the left a little bit before making that throw. So I was like, okay, Kirk. But all things considered, he was not going to be able to deal with this level of pressure in his first game back. Didn't play in any of the preseason. This was his full game speed reps really for the first time, and it didn't look good. So not saying that the contract is a disaster just yet. I wouldn't feel great about it if I were a Falcons fan, though. But we'll have to see, because Kirk Cousins, he's never just been a straightforward quarterback. You 100% know what you're getting. You do a little bit, but there are a lot of highs and lows that come with Kirk. So we'll see if the Falcons can ultimately bounce back after this game. They have a game on the road against the Eagles this upcoming week. Not super ideal for them. Have an extra day of rest, I suppose. This is a Monday night game, but tough defense in Philly as well, and really overall the schedule isn't super favorable to begin the year for the Falcons, because you have the Chiefs after that, another pretty tough defense in the Saints after that. So again, we'll see sort of how long this takes to see Kirk Cousins get acclimated, and if he doesn't, how quickly do these Michael Penix rumblings, when do they start to come into factor? But let me know what your thoughts in the comments section are. Ultimately, think that Kirk Cousins deserves a lot of blame, but this Falcons team as a whole has a lot of room to grow as well outside of him. But we're going to dive into another surprising result of the weekend, the biggest betting upset, which was the New England Patriots over the Cincinnati Bengals. And this was a game that not a lot of people saw coming. There were some factors headed into it in terms of the availability of wide receivers that did sort of open the door, but ultimately a surprising result, in my opinion, by the end of it. So we are going to break down all of the keys to that game and what is New England actually building something now under Gerard Mayo. We're going to be discussing that game, but first we're going to take a quick break. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast, as we're now going to be diving into the game that took place over the weekend between the New England Patriots and the Cincinnati Bengals. The Patriots surprising just about everybody with an upset win. They were 7.5-point underdogs to the Cincinnati Bengals on the road and were ultimately able to pull this game out 16-10, and I thought we're in control for a surprising amount of the game. Now, we're going to start a little bit more on the Patriots side of this and then talk about the levels of concerns with the Bengals. But for the Pats, this is a huge moment, a huge season overall, considering the fact that they are now entering the post-Bill Belichick era, now under Gerard Mayo. And this is a team that seems to have a little bit of that chip on their shoulder, nobody believes in us quality, which is probably for good reason, to be fair, for the most part. But this is a team that came out and was extremely physical and won at the line of scrimmage significantly more than I was anticipating. I feel like the general consensus has been that the Patriots defense is more than capable. I think they're better than just that. I think they have a chance to be one of the best defenses in the league. I don't want to get ahead of myself here, but I think in that top 8-ish range, that top 25% of the NFL, the Patriots can sort of find a making there. A lot of young talent that's continuing to develop. Christian Gonzalez, by the way, in this game, unbelievable performance against Jamar Chase. It's been a very limited sample size for him coming into the NFL, but he's just taken challenge after challenge, facing the Eagles, the Dolphins last year, the Cowboys, all of these premier matchups, and this time Jamar Chase, just in terms of the receivers he's matching up with against, and he has really been on top of every single one of them. So the defense is, again, a little bit more of a given with this Patriots team, but again, talking about being physical and winning the line of scrimmage, this offense, the expectations, at least for me and for a lot of people, were rock bottom heading into this year. It's been a stretch of some miserable offensive seasons ever since Tom Brady retired, and they were actually able to, it's not that they were unbelievable on offense, they put up 16 points, and ultimately it's not like they did anything all that crazy, but 3 drives of possession time of 6+ minutes. I know that doesn't sound that substantial, but when you're talking about a Patriots team that was never able to win the time of possession battle last year, they end up winning by just about 10 minutes in this game. I'm very impressed by that. Third down efficiency, again, the numbers I'm not going to throw at you are going to be super eye-popping, but they were 6 of 15 on third downs in this game, which, again, not excellent, but you talk about the Patriots where last year they were easily one of, if not the worst third down offenses in the NFL. They were at just 30%, so, you know, a little bit of a slight upgrade there under Jacoby Brissett. I thought Jacoby Brissett was actually, all things considered, relative to his expectations, of course, pretty good. And it's not like he came out there and put on a crazy stat line, 15 of 24, just 121 rushing yards. But you know what? He did enough for the Patriots to win. And that's sort of been the idea, is that they have this good defense. They just need something stable at quarterback, unlike what Mac Jones and Bailey Zappi had been for the past handful of years, that just don't turn the ball over right away. Don't put your defense in compromising situations. And they didn't turn the ball over. Ramondre Stevenson did have a fumble that he was able to recover again. Jacoby maybe got bailed out a little bit on a throw to the end zone, a jump ball between Bengals safety Von Bell and his tight end Hunter Henry, but ultimately wrestled out incompletion, no harm done. Brissett was far from flawless, but you know what? For considering the fact that, you know, in the offensive line, I briefly mentioned it there, they were fine. I wouldn't say they were great, but they were good enough. And good enough is kind of the theme that came out of the Patriots, is that it's just about building the vision and like, what is it going to take for this team to win? They just have to kind of not be a disaster on the offensive side of the ball. And their defense should be good enough that they can keep them competitive in games. The Patriots were able to jump out to a lead. We're up 13-0. Their offense, yes, got a little bit stagnant in the second half, but ultimately they were able to just sort of hold on, keep Joe Burrow off of the field more times than not. And Burrow, I do want to, again, I'm going to save the Burrow stuff for a little bit, because I feel like NFL fans are getting a little bit ahead of themselves in terms of this Joe Burrow slander. But I think that ultimately, again, they just sort of controlled the clocks. Ramondre Stevenson was incredible in this game, in my opinion. 25 carries, 120 yards. I can double check here as well, but I believe Pro Football Focus had that 118 of those 120 yards were after contact, which is ridiculous. But Ramondre Stevenson did seem like he was on his way to being one of the best running backs, and I am a Patriots fan, so hand up, maybe I'm being a little bit biased here, but Ramondre legitimately in 2022 was a massive part of that Patriots offense, and he had over 1,000 yards on just 210 attempts. He was extremely efficient. He was one of the best running backs in terms of yards after contact, and he just didn't seem to have the legs under him in the same way last season. And ultimately, when he did start ramping up, he was shortly injured for the rest of the season following that. So really didn't get the same experience last year, but I thought that Ramondre was incredible for them in this game, just sort of keeping those legs churning. The final first down that he picked up to seal the game was a prime example of that. Hit about 3 yards short of that first down line and just kept moving to be able to pick up the first down and have the Patriots be able to ice the game and just kneel it out. Sort of a concept that has been so foreign to the Patriots in years past, of having the capability of actually just milking out the clock when you get the ball. It was a decision for sure when the Bengals decided to punt with a few minutes left in that game. At that point, there were just over 2.5 minutes or so when they decided to punt back to the Patriots. The idea was they have 3 timeouts and the 2-minute warning that they were going to be able to stop the Patriots and then get another shot at it. Well, they never even ended up getting another chance because Ramondre just, kept pushing in this game. And again, I thought he was incredible. I thought the offensive line was significantly better than expected. In the run game, I would say they were definitively good. Passing game, a little bit shaky at times, but if you told me this Patriots offensive line was only going to allow 1 sack headed into this game, I would not have believed you. Because the Bengals do have a couple good pass rushers, and everything that we had seen from the preseason indicated that the Patriots offensive line was going to be a disaster. Now, there were mental lapses, absolutely, and at one point, Jacoby Brissett got absolutely lit up in the third quarter. Just nobody picked up a blitzing Logan Wilson. Not a recipe for success, and he just drove straight through Jacoby Brissett. He came up wincing, but it was ultimately able to come back. And again, Brissett, I think that he just did a really good job of understanding, and the Patriots' offensive game plan as well, of understanding that you're not going to be able to just sit back in the pocket and have all the time in the world. It is making quick decisions. It's making the right decisions. And how about Jacoby Brissett showing off a little bit of the mobility and stuff? Like, he was able to actually make plays with his legs, a couple times bouncing off defenders, picking up a few first downs with his legs. Also had an excellent throw in the first half, just standing. It was a 3rd and long, standing in, knowing the pressure was coming, just delivering the throw to Demario Douglas. I was overall ecstatic with what Jacoby Brissett was able to put together. And I think the best part about that game for the Patriots, because again, this is a team, yeah, it's nice that they won this game. I don't think that it's any indicator that the Patriots are going to, be in the playoff hunt by any means, but they beat a good team, and they seem so bought in on what Gerard Mayo is coaching them in the locker room with. Keon White, one of their standout defensive ends, sort of seen to be the Matt Judon replacement. He was incredible in this game as well, just constantly putting pressure on Joe Burrow. That he had a quote in the post-game interview talking about how Gerard Mayo, the team understands, Gerard Mayo won a Super Bowl as a player with this Patriots franchise less than 10 years ago. So he knows what it takes to succeed, and they're all bought in on that process of he is leading us in a direction we're going to follow him. They give him the premature Gatorade bath with about a minute and a half or so. Definitely jumped the gun a little bit there, but I think the excitement, and you could see just before that moment as well, you're looking at Jabril Peppers on the sideline just going crazy for Ramondre on that rush that we alluded to that sort of sealed the game. This is a Patriots team that for the first time in years appears to be bought in. And I'm not going to go the route of putting down somebody else to uplift the new, but the Patriots were not bought in on the end of that Bill Belichick era in terms of the excitement level of playing for him in relation to playing for Gerard Mayo at this point. And I'm so happy for Mayo. I'm hoping for the best for him. I think that he has a lot of potential to be sort of similar-esque to DeMeco Ryans and what he did for that Texans franchise last year. A lot of similarities, played linebacker both during the same era there in those 2010s with the same organization. The difference is Gerard Mayo also did have the benefit of playing and coaching under one of, if not the greatest head coach in NFL history in Bill Belichick. So I think that schematically as well, Mayo will have to see, absolutely, but I think that he has a lot to offer in terms of being a strategist on that defensive side of the ball. Now, there's a ton more that goes into it. The Bengals also shot themselves in the foot, I felt like, on a number of instances, whether it be Gesicki not holding on to the touchdown pass in the back of the end zone, and then Tanner Hudson fumbling at the 1 yard line. An incredible play by Kyle Duggar there to force that. Bengals fumble a punt as well that basically gift the Patriots a free 3 points. So the Bengals did a lot of it to themselves in this game, but the Patriots should be very proud of what they were able to put out on the field in this game. But that does take me to the other side of this was a messy game for the Cincinnati Bengals. And this is a team that I have had / I'm going to stand by my take that they should be a playoff team this upcoming season. But that's a rough way to start there. And so I want to dive into what the concern level is for the Bengals following this massive upset loss. So we will dive into that. Before we do so, we have to take a final break here. Do not go anywhere. We will be right back. Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast for our final segment of the day, where we just talked about the Patriots side of this matchup between them and the Cincinnati Bengals, and how it's this massive, fun, exciting moment for a young team under a new head coach that is hoping to find a new identity for themselves. On the other side of this, you have a Bengals team that has been to the AFC Championship game in 2 of the past 3 years, that has dealt with injuries last year and feels like they should be ramping up back towards Super Bowl contention, and instead they suffer a pretty embarrassing loss at home against a Patriots team where their over-under line, according to Vegas, was something like 3.5 games. And that's who you just lost to. That is a very tough way to begin the season. Now, I will say this, there was definitely a lot of noise with the Bengals within the past couple weeks, and within the offseason to some degree. You have the likes of the T. Higgins situation that really kicked it off, considering the fact that he ended up getting franchise tagged and was hoping for a more lucrative long-term deal. They weren't able to agree to any sort of an extension there. Jamar Chase has been holding out of practice in the past few weeks as he looks for a new contract. Trey Hendrickson as well at one point during the offseason requested a trade. So it hasn't exactly been all sunshine and flowers for the Bengals throughout the course of the offseason. And I do think that can tend to have a very real effect on how teams begin the season. That if you start dysfunctional, that dysfunction has a great chance to sort of spill into the regular season. But it's a matter of a question of, do you think that the Bengals can sort of get this back together? And I think it starts and ends really with Joe Burrow. And I am going to defend Joe Burrow because I think that a lot of people are now sort of chalking this up as, oh, Joe Burrow isn't good enough. See what happens when you take away T. Higgins and they lose Tyler Boyd as well during the offseason, that when you don't have, 3 top-end wide receivers, then what can you do? I hear you on that, and that is a storyline that I'm not fully ready to dismiss. Now, I think that Joe Burrow is better than that, and I think he's going to show that, but it's at least a theory that could definitely come into existence, but I don't think that that's what this game was about at all, really. Joe Burrow, I don't know how much more he could have done. He was 21 of 29 in this game, 164 yards, but he really wasn't getting much at all from his teammates. The running game was non-existent for a lot of the game. That was sort of the concern when they decided to move on from Joe Mixon, and they did it for money-saving purposes, and it's probably something that in the long run can benefit them in terms of being able to, pay somebody like a Jamar Chase and a Joe Burrow at the same time. But they didn't even really trust Zach Moss all that much in this game. Just 9 carries, only 3 carries as well for Chase Brown. So you're talking about 12 handoffs in the entire game. Meanwhile, on the other side, the Patriots had 32 handoffs. So a massive difference there. Again, also the fact that they weren't having that much success with it either. So then they were sort of having to settle into 2nd and longs and 3rd and longs, and they just never really were able to even have the flexibility to develop a rhythm there. But on that same point, Joe Burrow, he was trying to make these plays on 3rd and long, and the Patriots defense was, I thought, really impressive. Now, you can definitely put that on the Bengals offensive line as well. I happen to think that the Patriots have an underrated defensive front, so sort of choose with that what you will. They definitely needed to do a better job of protecting Burrow for whatever it's worth as well, considering the fact that he's coming back from this wrist rehab that kept him out for the final part of last season. And you know what? I mean, there were a couple plays Burrow was running himself. There was that one play he scrambled out to the right and made a throw downfield that I thought was pretty impressive. They mentioned on the broadcast that he was hoping to add a little bit more of that dynamicism to his game that you see, obviously, the Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jacksons, Josh Allens of the world that can make these plays on the move. Joe Burrow, when it gets to that out of structure type of play, I think that the confidence level is maybe a little bit lower in comparison to some of those other elite quarterbacks. But, you know, I don't think that Joe Burrow had a chance really to do all that much more. Now, I know sounds like I'm making excuses here, but I just overall don't think that the Bengals coming into this situation, knowing that Jamar Chase hasn't been practicing for them, that they were going to be without T. Higgins, this just didn't really feel like it was going to be a great offensive game for them, and it wasn't. And Burrow, I'll give him a little bit of a pass, I suppose, for now. That being said, he is going to need to prove himself a little bit more moving forward because now he has these doubters, supposedly. I mean, this is somebody that I think he's firmly in that second tier of quarterbacks in terms of, I think Mahomes is on his own tier, and then I think it's Joe Burrow, Lamar Jackson, Josh Allen following after. But you see the special playmaking ability of Lamar on last Thursday when he's picking everything up on the ground, the offense a little bit stagnant, a little bit out of flux. He's able to overcome that and keep the Ravens in the game. And then Josh Allen as well. They faced an early deficit against the Cardinals this weekend, and he ran crazy against them. Every time it got to the red zone, felt like if Josh Allen is going to drop back and then scramble, there isn't anybody in the vicinity of him, and he's just way too athletic to give him that much space. Burrow isn't that same level of an impressive, foot speed athlete like that he is a little bit disadvantaged in those conversations. And that's something that he is going to try and work on. The offense also needs to do a better job of giving him structure because that is when he's incredible. And I think he's, just about as talented as everybody else. I hesitate to put anybody, he's just as good as Patrick Mahomes because I do think Mahomes is, sort of head and shoulders, just clearly the number one amongst everybody else. But Burrow, when he has time to dissect the defense, and it's not like he needs all day because I don't think he's a system quarterback or anything like that, but his skill set is a little bit more in structure, and he thrives there as opposed to a Josh Allen where Josh Allen's great, and I thought that he showed development in terms of being able to put together methodical drives last year, but it's not like Josh Allen. I would take Joe Burrow if you take out the scrambling ability, and that's a stupid conversation, so I should probably just nix it as I say it, but, if you're just giving me two quarterbacks that you say you have to stand in the pocket and make plays, I have as much confidence in Joe Burrow as basically anybody else in the NFL. So I think that he deserves a little bit of, not a pass, not a mulligan, but just taking that into consideration and say, the Bengals need to look themselves in the mirrors and sort of do some reflections on what took place in this game. Because I thought that their defense, the fact that they were able to get pushed around so much, especially in the run game, by a Patriots team that isn't all that talented on the offensive line. Like I mentioned, on the Ramondre side of this, 120 carries, 118 of them yards after contact. I think that that's what Ramondre is sneakily one of the best at in the NFL, that he doesn't get the public recognition for. That being said, if you're the Bengals, got to wrap up. You got to tackle. And also part of it, so defensively, I thought that was definitely a concern. Got some pressure on Jacoby Brissett, sure, but also didn't finish off the job most of the time. Brissett could have easily been sacked more than one time in that game, but they just sort of let him be able to make plays with his legs, which is something that he's never really done in his career. And then I also feel like the other side of this is like, some bounces just didn't go their way at the end of the day. Mike Gesicki, it looked like, he was surely confident that he caught that pass in the second quarter in the back of the end zone, but he ends up dropping that, and then Tanner Hudson fumbles at the goal line that goes from 7 points there to 0, and then very shortly after that as well, you have a fumbled punt at the beginning of the third quarter. That's another 3 points right there. So all of these things just sort of added up. I don't even think that Joe Burrow necessarily got all that many opportunities to be able to, fully shine and be the guy that the Bengals needed to put the team on his shoulders. Now, he would definitely say himself that he needs to be better, and he could have absolutely been better, because it's not like he was excellent in this game by any means, but I don't think he was the reason why they lost. I think that that's something that, yes, as the quarterback of a team that only scored 10 points, you are going to get the blame there, but I feel like they also sort of hand-wrapped a number of other opportunities to the Patriots that left a feisty team so hungry to try and prove themselves an opportunity to go out and win it. And that's the thing is, if that Gesicki touchdown scores, or if Hudson doesn't fumble there and the Patriots aren't able to just sort of sit comfortably and play with the lead, I think it's a way different game. It's a way different approach from the Patriots, and I just don't know that I have the same level of confidence in them. But ultimately, they were able to jump out to a 13-0 lead and just sort of milk the clock and play the clock management game a little bit from there. But ultimately, I'm not panicking if I'm the Bengals. It's a tough loss, 100%, and it's something that, again, they're going to need to reflect on. Now, they will get T. Higgins back, it sounds like, next week, which is going to be huge because they're going to 100% need the offense as they go on to face the Chiefs in Kansas City next week. So a lot of room to grow for Cincinnati, but ultimately I'm not too worried about their overall ability to recover from this. But if you have more strong doubts than I do, let me know why in the comment section, because I would definitely be curious to hear. Not that I'm definitely not ruling out that they're in a tough division, and a lot of people picked them fourth. I myself didn't, but we'll have to see there. But that is all the time we have for today. Thank you very much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you very much to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. Remember to like, follow, subscribe wherever you keep up with us. Be sure to leave your thoughts in the comments section as well. Also, you can check us out on social media for more exclusive short content, but we will be back tomorrow afternoon to talk more about this week in the NFL and more at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern. So we will see you then. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn it.